sing the thunder song.
Wait.
When you hear the sound of thunder, don't you get too scared. Just grab your thunder buddy and say these magic words.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Thunder Buddies podcast. I'm Anthony Slater. Sitting in with us again, Darnell Mayberry and Barry Trammell's here too. This is you've kind of been christened in as the Thunder Buddy of coaching searches.
Let me tell you, as much grief as I give you guys, I appreciate it. I do indeed. After the vile wounds I've taken from the other segments of podcasting in the building, I much appreciate it.
No problem. Okay, my question, first question. How much has your opinion of a potential Billy Donovan hire to now change from when the name was first floated out there, hey, it's possible the Thunder could get Billy Donovan, to where you are now, which is he's been introduced. Obviously, it's official. You've talked to him. We've all had, at least a mild side conversations with him. You've done your research on him. Where were you at then? Where are you at now?
When we started this process, he was fourth, maybe at best, on my list.
At best.
At best. Yeah, I mean, he might have been fourth.
Depends on how realistic we're talking about.
No, I mean, Coach K was number one. I think Tom Thibodeau was number two. Kevin Ollie was number three. So, all three of those guys got jobs. If they couldn't get any of those guys, I wouldn't have minded Billy Donovan. And now that they got him, I think he's a heck of a hire. I think he's going to do a good job for this team. So I'm not going to say I changed, a ton, but I do enjoy him, or I do think that the hire is going to be pretty good.
I guess my question is, how has your opinion of him changed through your research, through, you talked to him a little bit?
Well, I think it's more just about talking to people, hearing him, hearing that, what his philosophies are, how he likes to do things. Everyone says he's a humble guy, and that to me was
it definitely came across.
It really came across in his press conference. He took time to do interviews with pretty much everybody in the local media after his 40-minute press conference. So to me, that was really impressive. It showed his humility.
Here's what I liked about Billy Donovan. I went into it not that crazy about him when when RFD talked about the initial when we first heard his name. I just assumed he's like most big-time coaches on the college level that I've come across, which it means I'm sure a great coach.
A little arrogant.
But a lot arrogant and not that easy to get along with, although certainly easier than a football coach. But just somebody, just somebody that I didn't think I would connect with. I didn't think people would connect with that easily. And frankly, I couldn't have been more wrong to this point. Now, who knows how it'll go, but one thing we learned in the days leading up to the press conference was that Sam Presti and others kept saying, this guy really doesn't have a big ego.
Yeah.
And I was sort of like, yeah, right, whatever. And maybe he does have an ego, but if he does, he hides it well. Yeah. Because he really came across as sort of a genuine guy that not – and you hear from a lot of Florida people that, I mean, they're sad to see him go. And you know what? The ones I've talked to and what I've read, they're not sad about the basketball part. They're not sad that, oh, my, if Mike Gundy left OSU, people would worry about what are we going to do about the football. If Bob Stoops left OU, what are we going to do about the OU football? They really wouldn't worry about, well, we're going to miss this guy.
Yeah, the AD today, Jeremy Foley, they did a farewell press conference, and before Donovan talked, Foley came up and talked, and you're right. I mean, he said something exactly, to that effect, which was, whatever about the basketball. And then he started breaking down and crying a little bit, talking about Billy Donovan and the person we're missing. So just through research of all that, like you said, talking to people, reading quotes, reading different things, and then dealing with him at the press conference. And even more impressive, probably, Darnell was there. We went to the Boys and Girls Club after. He dealt with the kids well, and then, he kind of talked a little bit more to the press in a more, conversational setting afterwards. And he was impressive there. I like this hire from a way. I guess why I brought this question up is because I was not high on it when I first heard his name, but now through everything, I'm a lot higher on it.
Yeah, so we'll see. I mean, we'll find out if he can coach. If he can get Russell and Kevin and those guys to mesh, he's going to be fine. So I'm pleasantly surprised.
Do you think the biggest one of the biggest positives about him, it seems, is that he has great personal relationships with his past players, with basically everyone around him, and that coincides with what you're probably going to need with like a Russell Westbrook or some of the guys on this team.
Well, I assume so. I mean, frankly, it's easy to say you have good relationships with people. We'll see if that actually comes to pass. And the easiest to say that is good relationships with your players, former players. Most coaches say that. I don't know how true it is in all cases. So we'll see if that pans out. I'm not casting dispersions. I don't have any idea the validity of the relationship between Donovan and his players. So I'm much more to I'll say this. I'm much more to this point impressed with the relationships with the people of Gainesville, Florida, than I am necessarily his relationships with his ex-players.
But all the ex-players love him.
Yeah.
Like they all swear by him, and I mean, you can't find anyone to say a bad word about him.
Yeah, they all came out after the hire and, praised it, really.
Right. So that, to me, speaks volumes. I mean, I believe it. I believe he had good relationships with all those guys, and they're professionals. So
yeah, and I think Kevin Durant believes it because, I mean, I know he likes Mike Miller. I know he talked
he recruited Mike Miller.
Yeah, he did. I remember that. They had some weird picture that summer where they were chilling. But anyways, the one thing at the press conference that you remember most or that came through or, what he said, so just what was your biggest takeaway from the opening press conference?
I don't know. RFD, what do you got?
I just liked how he didn't come in with any preconceived notions. He had two players, one star and one, role player that they call Mr. Thunder. So he had two very important players in the room, Nick Collison and Kevin Durant. And, he kept saying, I want to get to know these guys. I want to talk to them. I want to sit down and get to know them as people. He humanized them. And I think they were listening intently to what he was saying.
We dealt with Durant over the past.
Finish?
Yeah.
Thanks.
RBs. This guy's
you keep cutting me off.
In some kind of mood today.
Whatever. So that to me was the thing that I really took away from that the most, because he has to come in here and get these players' attention. And I think the way he talked, the way he described them as humans, as people first, and said that he wants to get to know them, that to me was the most interesting, and I think that's going to be the most important thing going forward for him.
Yeah, I like that, and maybe the thing I was most impressed with was when he talked about just the meshing of his mind with Presti's. When he talked about, I'm curious to learn and get these guys to grow, and it looked like he was talking straight out of Sam's playbook.
Did you see Sam Presti sitting next to him, just with hearts in his eyes?
Well, I mean, I was looking at Presti, seeing if his mouth was moving, see if this was a ventriloquist situation. But it's it was so good that it made me wonder if it had to be real, because I don't know that he could have mimicked it that quickly, just talking for 3 or 4 days.
No. What he was saying with Durant, humanizing them, I think that is a big thing with Kevin Durant. We've been around him for so long. He's always talked about, well, we're just people. We want to show these kids that we're just people. That's always kind of been along the lines of, talking points that Kevin Durant's had. So the fact that Donovan was up there saying that, I think is a good sign for their relationship. What I just kind of liked his honesty. It feels to me, we've dealt with Scott Brooks for the past few years. The Thunder don't care that he doesn't tell us stuff, but the fans a lot of times, they grumble when Scott Brooks goes up and basically says nothing, because he's not just saying nothing to us, he's saying nothing to the fans, basically. It seems to me Billy Donovan's confident enough in himself, whereas Scott Brooks might have been a little scared to say something. Billy Donovan's confident enough to know whatever I say, Sam Presti's not going to be mad about, and he will reveal stuff. And I think that came across in the first press conference.
Barry, how much of that do you think has to do with the fact that Scott Brooks has been a head coach 7 years, all with the Thunder? He came up under Presti. Presti has always been his boss, as opposed to a guy who comes in with 21 years of head coaching experience before he even worked for Sam Presti.
Donovan comes in with much more cachet than Brooks came in with. I mean, remember, Scotty was hired as an interim coach.
Right.
Probably didn't talk to the media
first, virtually the entire season, there was no certainty he was getting the job. And if you remember, it seemed to a lot of us, this is interesting in retrospect, seemed to a lot of us that after they went 20-30 down the stretch of that first season, that Scotty was doing a great job and deserved to keep it. But if you remember, we all thought, it's certain they'll keep him. But it wasn't a slam dunk from the Thunder. I think they actually did a lot of soul searching and thinking about that. And then 3 years later, they go to the finals. Scotty's contract's up. It's automatic. Well, you got to keep Scotty Brooks doing a great job. Well, it turns out the negotiations were a little contentious, and it wasn't a slam dunk. And I'm not sure that Scott Brooks ever fit the model that Sam Presti wanted as a head coach. It just turned out he ended up having to take the job at a certain time and did so well at it that you couldn't really change. But I think this is the first time that Sam Presti has the coach he sort of envisioned for his franchise.
Why do you think Brooks was so unforthcoming with information and almost – I mean, comparing him to –
I think he's just I don't think scared is the right word, but I just think he's trying to adapt to the Thunder way.
I'm very interested if he gets a job in Denver or Orlando or somewhere where they don't care as much. I'm interested to see if he suddenly becomes a better quote.
We always heard that Scotty was a lot more, ornery or a lot more –
he is when you get him and the cameras are off and he knows he's not being recorded. He'll come up and rip you.
He'll zing people, and I mean he'll be funny and, but when you've done something a certain way for so long, he may not be able to go back.
I don't think he's changing.
Yeah.
7 years is a long time.
He may not be able to go back.
But
that is a long time.
Yeah. The other thing I thought was interesting, he came in talking about he didn't know anything about the Thunder organization. I think in some ways because there was so little information out there that Sam Presti and Donovan's relationship became such a storyline within this coaching search.
Right.
I think that became pretty overrated. Just how close they were. I mean, obviously we know Sam Presti took a bunch of recruiting trips down there, visited a ton of players, talked to Donovan a lot, but when he came out and said, I had to do a ton of research because I really didn't know anything about the Thunder organization. I'd never been to a game there, different things like that. I thought that was honest from him, and I thought it was interesting.
I didn't think it's completely honest. I think he knew a lot about the Thunder organization.
I don't
think you take a job.
Well, I think that's what
I don't think you leave Florida after 19 years after. I don't think you can do that in 4 days. I think he knew a lot about. I think he knew a lot. I don't know if he knew who the assistant general manager was. And I don't know that he knew, Dwight's philosophy on training and physical, development. But I think he had to know the general Thunder philosophy. Just sit and talk basketball with Sam Presti, more than once. And you got sort of an idea of what kind of an operation he's going to run.
But it sounds like he was very, very interested in the smallest of details. Who's the chef that cooks this? What kind of food here? He did his background information a ton on Durant and probably every player, because he is like Sam Presti in some ways. But I don't think he knew as much as we thought he knew, and then I don't think him and Presti were as close as we thought. That's just what I got from it.
No, I would agree with you on that. I mean, in fact. I don't know that Presti and Donovan were what we would call friends. Sam has told me, probably told you this when you did that story, he's friends with Brad Stevens.
Yeah.
I don't know that he was with Billy Donovan on any kind of real level before this.
They seem like BFFs on that podium.
Yeah. I wouldn't even just say BFFs. To me, it just looked like Presti was
match made in heaven.
That is for sure. But I feel like, I don't know. Did you look at Sam's face at all during the press conference?
Honestly, I was more watching Kevin Durant's face, which was an event in itself.
What was his face doing?
It depends on the time of the press conference.
Well,
he was listening intently. He really was trying to pay attention, and then he pulled out his phone, started playing on that. I think he lost interest. And then Billy Donovan started talking about Durant. Someone asked him about Kevin Durant and, re-signing and all of that. And I thought Billy Donovan actually answered it fairly well. I thought he answered it great, honestly. He said that this organization's philosophies match up with Kevin Durant. He feels like Kevin Durant is aligned with this organization's philosophy. So he said that's not something he's worried about. But Durant kind of hung his head after that, at that point, and he didn't want it to be about him, it looked like. So it was just interesting watching Durant's reaction to the whole thing.
Your biggest concern moving forward?
With Donovan?
Yes, yeah. I mean, there's got to be some. You can't still think this is a slam dunk.
No, I wouldn't call it a slam dunk to begin with, but as long as this team is healthy, they're going to win. So I'm not really concerned about him as a coach or what he's going to do, how he's going to transition. As long as Durant's foot heals and Serge Ibaka gets right, Nick Collison, who had surgery out of the blue, Enes Kanter.
Those are just scopes. So.
As long as those guys come back healthy, this team's going to win 60 games or more. My concern is how is he going to play the game in the postseason? How's he going to adjust and when he's got to match up with a Rick Carlisle or a Greg Popovich? What kind of tactical adjustments is he going to be able to make in the postseason? I really don't care until April.
Yeah, I wouldn't say this is a concern, but this is an interest of mine. It's just his assistants, what he does with his assistants.
Yeah, the staff's very interesting. I want to see how many guys he's going to keep off the current staff. I got to believe that he would bring in a Florida guy, maybe one. Bring in an NBA experienced guy, and everybody else will be holdovers.
Yeah, my thought is kind of what you're saying. I think they want to bring in like a defensive-minded NBA experienced guy. I don't know if Mike Malone's interested in being an assistant, but I know you love.
Be.
Well, if he can't get a head coaching job, you want a job somewhere, right?
Yeah, but maybe he's next in line for a head coaching job somewhere.
So then, let's say he doesn't get a head coaching job. Wouldn't defensive mind of a potential NBA title contender for a year, the Thunder have a really good year, then you jump to a head coach again? To me, it seems like a very top assistant job would be the guy they bring in, Billy Donovan. Because just think about how much hype Alvin Gentry and Ron Adams are getting right now just because they're assistants on a really good team. So I actually think you can bring in a former head coach with a defensive pedigree to maybe be a lead assistant.
It'd be like Scott Brooks almost, in a way, going to be an assistant coach. I wouldn't.
No, Scott Brooks and Mike Malone don't have near the same.
Scotty's got a lot better
credentials.
He coached for a lot longer, 6 years longer. But
Alvin Gentry has more head coaching experience than Mike Malone,
right?
You know what I mean? So I could easily see Malone. I mean, Malone for sure would prefer a head coaching job.
I feel like Mike Malone could go get the Denver job.
Okay, but if he doesn't, what does he do next year? You know what I mean?
Really, I would think Scotty would get it before Mike Malone.
If I'm Scott Brooks, I wouldn't go to Denver. I'd try to go to Orlando.
Well, but if you can't get Orlando,
I still wouldn't go to Denver.
You wouldn't go to Denver?
No.
They actually have a pretty good starting lineup.
Yeah.
I don't know how much depth they've got. But
Orlando.
The worst coaching job I've seen in a long time was by Brian Shaw. That was terrible.
Throw Brian Shaw under the bus while you're at it.
Nice guy.
They came in late in the year, and I was thinking, man, Denver used to be good. They used to have players. And then they came in, and I was at the game, and I looked at their roster. They still have a bunch of good players. So I don't think he did a very good job.
So I think you get, like we mentioned, I think they're going to do this, get an NBA experienced, lead assistant. And then you're right. I think he brings one or two guys in from Florida or from his background that he's comfortable with. Because not only do you want a guy that knows the NBA, you want an assistant that knows him, that's dealt with him before on the sidelines. And then I agree with maybe you have some holdovers. Maybe Mark Bryant. The big man loved playing for Mark Bryant. He's developed some over time.
Mark Bryant was not at the press conference.
He was not. The only assistant there was Darko, that I saw at least.
And your boy Vinny.
Vinny was there. Well,
Vinny was there.
They can't I can't turn the lights on without Vinny. I think they realize that.
So I would expect Darko to be back just by the fact that he was there, the fact that he signed last year. He seems like a Sam Presti molded player. Or coach, I guess. But and then Mark Dagnall's like a name that's, does he stay being head coach of the D-League team, or does he move over to the pro staff? We'll see. But grade the hire.
Oh, I don't have any idea.
Yeah, we can't really grade it, I guess.
I mean, it's better than I thought. It's better than I thought. They seem to be kindred spirits, and I think that's probably a good thing. don't you? I think it seems likely now. It seems likely that there was some friction, and maybe it wasn't overt, but it seems likely that there was some friction between Presti and Brooks, just in the way they wanted to. The way Presti wanted Scott to sort of view the whole NBA world, and Scott really wasn't interested. I mean, I think Scott made some inroads and did his best in some regards.
And he was a good middle ground between this statistically driven front office and the players who a lot of times are.
Well, let's be honest. We've talked about. You guys have told me more than I've told you about his. He's slow to play young players.
Yeah.
I think that's a Presti mantra.
He did. I don't think Presti liked, especially maybe not this season, but in the past seasons, how little Jeremy Lamb was given a chance.
Well, and Reggie Jackson too. Well, maybe not so much in playing time, but just treatment.
I'm not allowed to say anything about Reggie Jackson.
According to who? Just because a couple people tweet at you doesn't mean you can't talk about it.
Yeah, that's the narrative. Whatever.
I mean, I just think
who cares, Darnell?
I think it's a deal where I just think Scotty looks at Reggie Jackson as sort of a failed project, and I think he may hold Scott Brooks not completely responsible, but to some degree responsible.
Reggie Jackson shot himself in the foot this year, as much as anyone else. The guy I look at more is Jeremy Lamb.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy has skill.
12th overall pick. The difference between him and Perry Jones is Perry Jones was a 28th pick. That was like kind of a project. They brought in Lamb thinking Lamb was like going to be a player right away.
And I think he still could be a very good player in the NBA, but he just never got the chance consistently under Scott Brooks, and I think that goes to what Barry is talking about with the young players. He really hadn't played young player. Steven Adams, because that was just the weakest position that they've ever had, the center spot. But, toss out Steven Adams, he really hadn't played young players since the Serge Ibaka days.
Yeah, he got better, I think, the last few years, but still probably not to Presti's hopes. And some of the last few years may have been Presti kind of putting the foot down.
Yeah. I mean, even when Harden was here, I mean, he wasn't playing him nearly as much as he probably should have. Jeff Green had to be traded in order for Serge Ibaka to get quality minutes and getting that starting lineup. So
and that's the kind of thing I'm talking about, where Scotty obviously did a good job of coaching, no doubt about it. But just organizational philosophy, they weren't really driving down in the same direction.
Agreed. MVP vote came out today. Steph Curry 1, James Harden 2, LeBron got 3, and then Westbrook was 4, Anthony Davis was 5. I voted on some awards. MVP was not among the awards that I voted on. Only one person in this room actually voted, and I was doing the chat today, and people were coming at me for your vote.
Welcome to my world.
Yeah, well.
Glad I got off the chat today.
Anyway, I wanted to give you a chance to explain your vote because you did not have Russell Westbrook in your top 5. What was your top 5? Curry or Harden first?
Harden number 1, Curry 2, LeBron 3, I think Chris Paul 4, Anthony Davis 5. And if I had a 6th slot, Russell Westbrook would have been on it.
But just explain to people, because I had a few people on the chat say, how could you not have Russell Westbrook? How can the Oklahoman explain itself?
Well, it's real simple. It's not an indictment on him. It's not a slight against him, in my opinion. I think he just missed 15 games, with the injuries. I don't think he was as consistent as the other players that I put ahead of him. He had 2 spectacular months, and you have to recognize that. But, he really had, I think, January? He had a real down month in January. And the other months were good, but, I thought what really set him apart were those 2 months. What was it, February, March?
Yeah.
So you can't have a bad month of January where you shoot like 34% or whatever it was bad, and then miss 15 games, which is the equivalent of another month. So 2 months out of a 5-6 month season, that's not MVP worthy in my opinion.
And the fact that they didn't make the playoffs hurts him.
Of course. So I don't think he was as consistent as the other performers. He missed the games. Defense, I didn't think he played both ends nearly as consistently as he should have.
Some of that was the load he was carrying, obviously, but you're right. In some ways.
So and then the winning, like he didn't produce wins against good teams. We've talked about that, away from the podcast. He didn't produce wins against good teams, and he didn't produce wins when it mattered most to this team down the stretch. For all those reasons, I thought they beat up on a lot of bad teams, and for all those reasons, I couldn't put him in the top 5 when those other guys, like Chris Paul, for example. People want to knock him for not playing 82 games ever in his career, but then when he does it, nobody wants to say anything about it. He played all 82 games, and he was consistent, and I thought he played both ends better than Russell Westbrook.
Here's the deal. Russell was fantastic this year. He was fabulous. But we didn't name the award. Somebody else named the award. What was his value to the Thunder this season?
He kept them competitive.
What's the value of that? I guess my point is. They didn't make the playoffs. They'd have been better off winning 19 games rather than 45. So, I just don't see what the value is. It's the most valuable player, and Westbrook's value to the Thunder this year was not all that high compared to the people we're talking about. Chris Paul, we've seen in the playoffs his value to the Clippers. Harden, it's out of the sight. Curry, all those guys. Anthony Davis, got his team to the playoffs, and it hadn't been there in 7 years. So, I thought Westbrook was fantastic, but he was not, in my opinion, one of the leaders in the discussion for most valuable player.
Yeah, I would have had him about 3rd or 4th if I voted, but there's so many different ways to discuss this. I don't think it's an issue.
To me, it's the same thing. Like I had Harden number 1. I thought he did more with less with that Rockets team than Steph Curry. I thought Steph Curry was the most electric player throughout the season. He was the most exciting. He definitely put on a show and helped that team win a lot of games. 67 wins. It's a hell of a season. But I thought James Harden did more with less.
Yeah,
and his value to the Rockets was more important to me than Steph Curry's value to Golden State, which was a loaded team.
Yeah, there's so many different ways to look at it. But there was a clear group of 6 guys that were, legitimate candidates. And then there was the top tier was the Harden. Curry was clearly the 1-2 debate. And then after that, you could have put, I think, 3, 4, 5, 6 in whatever order you kind of wanted to. You just chose the one you did.
Okay, so let's not make this about me. You said you would put him 3rd.
Yeah.
Why would you put him 3rd over guys like Chris Paul, Anthony Davis, LeBron James?
Just what he did and just the impact he had and the way he just dragged this team, kept their spirits up really through some of the most ridiculous injury, luck we've seen in a long time. Dragged them to the same exact record as Anthony Davis' team. I know they didn't have the tiebreaker.
Right.
Really the fringe of the playoffs. If you put him in the Eastern Conference, they're the 6th seed. Just what he did with this roster, the way it was in and out, the trade, what he did during the midseason trade when Enes Kanter came in, the way he really brought Enes Kanter along. He had an unbelievable season. And, a lot of people would agree with me that he was in that 3-4 range. I think he ended up 4th right behind LeBron. Mm-hmm. So I'm not killing your decision, but my point is you could make arguments for all these guys in these different spots.
I was going to say something. I forgot what I was going to say.
Surprising. I don't want this to turn into a Westbrook Paul debate. I want to talk a little playoffs. This is the time of the year we were expecting to be talking in an LA hotel room or something like we were doing last year, talking about a series we're covering. We're not, but I know all 3 of us still watch the playoffs. Spurs Clippers. My question is, how would you rank the first round series? Spurs Clippers this year. Remember that Bulls Celtics one?
In 2009, I think.
Yeah. Or Thunder Grizzlies last year, which was a great series. How would you rank those?
I thought Boston, Chicago was the best I'd ever saw. The thing about Thunder Grizzlies was fantastic. 4 straight overtime games.
That was the thing, 4 OTs.
But if you remember, the other 3 games were blowouts.
Yeah.
Game 1, Game 6, Game 7.
Game 6 was great just for the emotional. It was like the Thunder season was on the brink. They were getting highly criticized. Everyone knows what happened.
It was emotional for us because it was after the headline. But Thunder just went out and sort of took care of business that night, and Memphis never really was in it. So
the Game 7 too was
anticlimactic because of Zach Randolph,
and that's a problem when you compare like a Spurs Clippers.
That was a great Game 7 last night or Saturday night.
Yeah, that's the thing that kind of puts it over the top because you can't have the climax be rough. But there were so many twists and turns of that Thunder Grizzlies series that the Crawford icing, the Perk sitting on Miller, obviously the headline, just Tony Allen's involvement. Maybe it's because I covered it, but I kind of think that is going to get underrated over time. So you put Bulls.
I think that's the best I can remember. Bulls, Celtics. That was the year Kevin Garnett was out.
Perk was averaging like a double-double.
Boston was defending champ. They were great, but Chicago was back in the playoffs. They were the upstart. Boston was great, but playing without Garnett. So it was great basketball.
Was that Rose's rookie year?
I believe it was, yes.
Darnell probably loved that series.
Derrick Rose, a star was born.
How would you rank him?
Rank what?
Those 3 series.
What 3?
Oh, he's been listening well. Bulls, Celtics, 09. Thunder, Grizzlies last year. Spurs, Clippers this year. Those 3 first-round series, how would you rank like your favorite to watch?
I don't remember those other 2 having a dud like Game 4. Was it Game 4, the Spurs, Clippers? They went to San Antonio and got blowed out.
Yeah, but I mean, think about Thunder Grizzlies Game 7 here was a dud.
Yeah, I mean, that was Zach Randolph, and they were kind of spinning their wheels at that point.
That was a dud.
It wasn't like a dud in Game 4.
Yeah, but the fact that Spurs-Clippers had
Clippers scored like 65 points in that game.
Yeah, but doesn't the Spurs-Clippers having a great Game 7, which is like the pinnacle, may kind of change that? Because the Thunder
definitely. I would probably say Spurs, Clippers, or Boston, Chicago. Which one did you say, Barry?
I said Boston, Chicago.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. That also had 4 OT games.
That was a heck of a series.
Yeah, that was great.
They kind of had one blowout, and it was Celtics blew out the Bulls actually in Chicago Game 3. But
what was the score that?
107-86.
Yeah, so I guess all 3 had a blowout in them.
It was a great series.
All right. Where are you guys at right now with Western Conference? Do you think the Warriors have just become
the Warriors look superior to me?
Yeah.
I think the Clippers have the best chance at taking them out. I don't think the Rockets have
Paul
any chance.
Paul has to be healthy.
Paul has to be healthy, and they still might not make it. I didn't think the Spurs played very well in this series.
Leonard didn't have a very good series.
And I don't think the Rockets have a chance. The Grizzlies will always fight you, but without Mike Conley, they're hurting. So I think the Warriors are going to win the NBA title.
The East is just ew right now with
I hope Chicago wins it.
That series was starting tonight. That's going to be a good one.
Maybe
I mean, with
enjoy
Kevin
that.
Love out, it makes it a lot more interesting. J.R. Smith suspended for the first 2 games. Do you think who would you predict to win the East?
I would pick Chicago right now.
Really?
Yeah, without Kevin Love, yeah. And without and with J.R. Smith, he's played well since the trade.
He's much needed shooter.
So I think Chicago's, they can guard people, so they're going to, I don't know. Kyrie and LeBron are certainly hard to corral, but I sort of like Chicago in that series.
What do you think of the Washington Wizards?
So they're amazing. They're playing extremely well.
It's the first kind thing Barry's ever said about the Wizards.
I actually didn't get. I got home. I didn't tape the game at first, so I did miss the first 3 quarters, and I heard that Atlanta had 63 points at halftime, and then to see them be so terrible on offense the rest of the game was just. It was amazing.
They didn't score in the fourth till like 5 minutes, 4.5 minutes.
Yeah, it's crazy. 7:52 or something. Or
7:32, I think it was.
It's just nuts. So I think Washington may get out of there. Atlanta hadn't played well since January.
Yeah, no.
So it may be Washington
against. Wizards got problems. Bradley Beal's
he turned that ankle.
Right ankle and John Wall's left wrist. And Nene didn't do a thing for him in game 1.
Well, he didn't play. I saw. Did he play? He didn't play the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and he was non-existent. In the first 3 quarters, which he missed. So
that's a kind of a good sign that Nene
didn't play well and they still won.
Yeah.
It was a heck of a resilient win. I mean, Atlanta kept making all these runs. Every time Washington cut it to 4 or 5 or 6, Atlanta get it right back up to 11, 12. because they kept hitting threes. And Washington had an answer for them, man. They kept coming back. That was a resilient win.
Who you think's going to win the East? Cavs, Bulls, or
My
Wiz?
question about the Bulls is, can they guard LeBron?
Which is probably no. Jimmy
Butler does a great job on him, but he can't do it alone. And Derrick Rose has no shot of staying in front of Kyrie Irving.
Derrick Rose is the most important player in that series.
Yeah, but he can't stop Kyrie Irving.
No, he can't.
So,
well, I mean, you'll see Butler on him some.
Well, then who's going to be on LeBron? Mike
Well,
Dunleavy?
Well, I mean, it depends on. They're going to have to mix and match. It's going to be a mess. But
Tony Snell might have a, he might
Snell
have a big
will
game,
get to play.
big series.
He'll get to play a lot. He'll get to play a lot because of that.
Not necessarily.
Heinrich will play a little. Heinrich can guard Kyrie Irving in short doses.
Yeah,
2-3 minutes.
He's a pesky
I've always liked Kirk Heinrich.
He's a pesky defender strictly for like guards.
Yeah,
he can't go bigger in the guard, but he always frustrated Dwayne Wade. But but we all agree Warriors clear favorite to win it all.
Yeah, at this point, San Antonio to me was. Although that Clippers, I think the Clippers, if Chris Paul's hamstring is right, I think the Clippers are going to beat Houston. That Clippers-Warriors series could get interesting.
And potentially like frisky with the way Draymond Green and Blake Griffin and all that.
What's my man's name? Dante Jones?
Yeah,
bumping him.
I really hope that Clippers get fully healthy, and that is the Western Conference Finals, because that'd be a great series.
Yeah.
Clippers
that
are playing
to me
really
would have
well.
been the second best series behind Spurs-Warriors.
Yeah.
And all of the playoffs.
Warriors Cavs could be really good, but now that Love's out, that changes things. So, all right, you guys good?
Rest in peace, Spurs. I was pulling for you. I'll miss Greg Popovich.
I mean, look, I enjoy watching the Spurs, but I didn't necessarily want to see them win another title. I like new blood. That all four conference finalists from last year are all eliminated. 3 didn't make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Heat, Thunder, Pacers. And Spurs are eliminated. That's crazy. That might be the first time in history that before the second round, the 4 conference finalists from the year before are eliminated. I think it's interesting.
Well, we're going to have a new NBA champion for the first time in at least 98. Nobody left has won a title since 98 in the NBA.
I think that's a good thing.
It's a great thing.
Get some new blood in there.
It's a great thing.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying I wasn't really rooting for the Spurs.
Yeah, it's a great thing. No doubt
I
about
wasn't rooting for the Spurs, but I'd like to see them play.
Yeah, I mean,
they play beautiful basketball.
Yeah, and
the way they play, you gotta love the way they play.
I agree.
I love watching them.
All right, we'll talk to everyone again. Who knows? At some point,
we'll come back and do another one in the postseason. Barry, thank you so much for sticking with us through this coaching search.
You guys are sportsmen for inviting me.
We'll come back later and do one for the podcast.
Yeah, next week
for the playoffs.
Yeah. Draft, summer league coming. We'll talk to you.
Draft. We got the draft.
It matters again.
Durant, pull-up jumper, off the rim, and and the Thunder win! Come on, let's sing the Thunder song. When you hear the sound of thunder, don't you get too scared. Just grab your Thunder buddy and say these magic words.